Something bad is coming in October. And when I do say that, I'm mainly referencing something that Hillary Clinton just said in an interview, saying a surprise warning to Kamala Harris that something bad might be coming out for her on her character, and it might not be good for the Harris camp. But this is mainly just a reminder that this election can affect the market. And when we see her say something like something bad in October could happen, we're actually seeing signals that say a similar story. So it's important we get into some technical analysis, checking out the bigger time frames today, mainly going to focus on weekly charts for the stocks that we're going to cover. SPY Qs, Apple, Tesla, Amazon, Nvda, AMD, and Meta, looking for some things on AMC and GME as well. But for the most part, we just want to pay attention and say, if these things do happen, we will be prepared for it. It's important to note that even though we see some bad signals, nothing in the market is 100%. We obviously on this channel like to say this a lot. We like to trade like water, meaning that we just move around those rocks. We make sure to trust our signals. We pay attention to those signals all the way from the short time frames to the bigger ones. And that's why we got to get into some macro analysis. Starting off with the SPY, I just wanted to show you guys something from the past. I think it's good to look into the past to see these past signals, how they played out, and why the weekly charts are so important. And I do want you to pay attention to something here. We do notice some divergences here at the all-time, or the previous all-time high, right, back in January of 2022, where we formed a top. And you're going to notice at that top, you have this really downward direction for your momentum indicator, the MACD, showing you that divergence from the price action, right? The price action is heading up while your indicator is heading down. That is a sign of weakness in momentum. And if something bad happens when you do have this look, it can get a little bit ugly, okay? So what I wanted to show you was this moment right here. We make some flat divergences all the way across this, right? All the way from these points here, we make flatness. But then when that becomes significant is when you really have to pay attention. And we're going to keep that in your notes because we're going to talk about that in a second with where we're at right now. We have to be aware of something bad happening because we do have the opportunity for a bad signal to confirm over the next couple of weeks. We are still in bullish context, but it's good to look into the past and see how these things played out. Once you did create that significance, something bad happens and boom, you end up in that negative trend heading all the way down, right? Big drop here. All the way from, what is the price point up here? About 480, we'll say 480, all the way down to about 350, okay? Now notice, what did we make at the bottom of that in order to head in the upward direction? I want you to notice something very key here. A lot of the time when you're getting a reversal from a bottom, not necessarily a top, when you're getting a reversal signal from a bottom, notice the price action is heading in downward direction, but your indicator is pointing in the upward direction, giving you that divergence, and the RSI is pointing in the upward direction, giving you that divergence again, and it is very significant. A lot of the time, the bullish signals, aka the reversal signals for a downward move to start producing a positive trend, play out a little bit easier. So that is something you can note, but for the most part, I just want you to see how this one played out and why we need to pay attention to right now. I think that's important. Look where we actually ended up from since we actually confirmed that divergence. Well, we never reached down towards these lows again because we were able to use this, go into that positive trend. So these are the type of signals we want to look for. So let's look at the current price action and see on the weekly scale, do we see any of those signals forming, or do we see any of those signals confirming? And the truth is, you do have all these highs and you have that evenness, right? That flatness up on this one, but you are very significant now. So if something bad were to happen in October, you would have that flatness of the RSI that leads to the more significant divergence. And that's where you really want to pay attention. So you do have potential here for a bad signal. And we just showed you how the last time we created a signal like this, yes, it can be wonky. We can continue to go up. I want to be very clear. This is curled up in positive territory. There is room on this RSI to still get overbought. But for the most part, we want to pay attention to if that does curl down, right? On this channel, we trade like water. We pay attention to multiple time frames. We pay attention to both sides. And right now you're seeing this, which is in an overall bullish trend. But on the weekly scale, if we did roll over in the next 2 weeks, then we could see something ugly. And that's why we want to pay attention. And that's why I'm actually saying or putting out there the thing that Hillary Clinton said, because I know people maybe don't think that politics can affect the market in any way, but they actually can, I think, this time. I really think they can this time. So we'll pay attention to that as we are getting towards election season. But I just wanted to show you how this is forming all of these divergences. And if we confirm that over the next couple of weeks, that is going to be relatively significant. And this is where we really need to watch out for some downside. Right as people are getting euphoric about rate cuts, right as people are getting euphoric about the strike ending or getting postponed into 2025, right as all those things are happening, we notice job data revisions. And then we get jobs data that looks artificially good, which will most likely be revised next month. So it just tells me, hey, if I take upward plays, that's perfectly fine on those shorter time frames. But if this weekly ever rolls over, I should be very cautious about taking upward plays, because I do not want to think that this thing is going higher on a shorter time frame and then end up curling down on a weekly MACD and seeing something absolutely ugly. And you're going to see this on pretty much all the charts. You really will. You'll see the divergences we made here for the Qs. And notice that goes all the way back to 2020, all the way back to August of 2020. We see that downward divergence, right? We see that divergence forming there. We see the price action heading to the upside. And you'll notice that this one here was pretty much significant. Ever since this point here, you had significant divergence all the way across it. So it is important to pay attention to times where that does curl up, because that means it's most likely not the moment. But you notice momentum continued to go up. And even though this looks like great price action, just the momentum indicator here saying all these curl ups are not the strongest. Even though it lasted a long time, it's telling you these are not the strongest. And once some bad news comes out, that's the key thing. You need that bad news, right? You need something bad to actually happen, or else you're just going to keep curling up, and these tight little curl ups hold that 9-week moving average. But you notice that the price action, after we actually did break down, broke that low, started to create those lower lows, was pretty ugly. And what do we see at the bottom? Not only do we see a little divergence here, we actually get a rejection divergence with a double bottom right here. So you actually had almost a triple divergence if you want to include the rejection, and that really led to a major bull run. So what do we see at the top as of right now? And I think the Qs are telling things a little bit different. All right, Qs are telling things just a little bit different here. We actually do see that flatness across all the way until now, and we have not made that divergence point. Now, a lot of tops do include a time where the Qs actually are not able to make that higher high. Okay, if we really wanted to go back, we could probably see a bunch of moments on the shorter ones, but on the weekly scale, you actually do see that a lot of the time we will go make a higher high. Okay, I wanted to be clear about that. Hopefully I said that clear enough. The main thing I was getting across here is on the daily scale, a lot of the time, the Qs will make the lower high, but on the weekly scale, you will actually see it make that divergence. So I think you actually do, if this curls up, obviously you're in positive territory. You're in a positive trend. You're in a positive channel. So all of this means if this does curl up, we can head higher, but in October, we want to watch out for those monthly expected moves, 513.03 to the upside. And then you also want to pay attention if that rejects, because if the SPY confirms that divergence, right? If the SPY confirms that divergence up at that all-time high, then that's actually going to be a bad thing for the Qs, and that might be hinting more towards a lower high for the Qs. And we did see a random curl up at the very, very end of the day on volatility, so that's something to pay attention to. How ugly could this get? You know, how ugly could this get? Well, if you end up in that downward trend and most of this is, say, artificially held up or held up in some way by retail, well, we know that insiders have been selling at an unprecedented rate. Throughout this entire bull run, a lot of people just going into cash. And we've seen cash really bottom out and show major, major strength. So that just tells us, with all the things going on in the world, if something bad does happen, you're kind of inviting a more sudden drop, I would say. I'm still leaning more towards a bear market, but as things keep starting to escalate, I'm leaning more and more towards some kind of sudden move that leads to a bounce and another sudden move down. And just a note, if you want to put this on your charts, 326.76 is the low for the entire year, and then actually 492.28 is as high up as the options market is expecting us to go in 2024. So we are at the total high that the options market has priced in for 2024, and it would be very, very interesting to end up all the way down at the low by the end of the year. Obviously, we're still paying attention to the signals. This is not to fearmonger you in any way. I want to pay attention if this curls up. If that curls up, positivity. If it rejects and I see the SPY turn down and I see volatility even scaling up higher than what it's at right now, then I need to pay attention, because that might be a riskier time to take upward plays. But not everything is easy, right? No, there's some easy trades, there's some that are going to be a little bit more difficult. And I always encourage people, if the signal does not look absolutely fantastic, if it's making you have to second guess, if you're having to think about it too much, if you're really not seeing it very clearly, if things are wonky, then it usually means, hey, take a breather, look for something else. There's always going to be another trade setup. You might just need to wait another 24 hours. So what's the difference between Aapl? Well, you see Aapl, this is where we called the double top for Aapl way back on this YouTube channel. We called the double top for Aapl. Why? Because look at that significance of the divergence when you were at that double top for the weekly scale. Okay, that is very, very significant, and it even sent you into negative territory. And then if we go back a little bit, this is where we called the lows back in October, because this is January, but this is back when we actually called the lows here for January 2023, because we formed a divergence, and that divergence held decently significant across the RSI and MACD at the same time. And that's something to note as well. It's something we teach in the courses down in the description. You really have to, in order to be like, hey, there's higher probability to see a reversal in trend, you want to see these indications on both the RSI and the MACD at the same time. And what that's going to look like is here, right? Notice I see it on the MACD and I go, oh, that could be a reversal signal. But what if the RSI is all the way up here? Well, then that's going to be a little bit different. The RSI has room to pull back and then curl back up. So I want to see both of those at the same time. And that's what we saw here. That's why Aapl saw ugly price action. And here we had daily divergence. That's why we're getting the positivity. But if you want to look at it from a weekly swing trade perspective, hey, we curled up on the MACD. We were able to go positive and we held above the moving averages. Boom, we head to the upside. So as of right now, for something like Aapl, it's telling a little bit of a different story. You notice that we have some slight divergence. I would say maybe on the daily scale, you kind of have it across the way here for potentially a triple top on the daily scale. But when we look at the weekly, this could just be a weekly pullback that turns up over time. So we want to pay attention to Aapl, because Aapl is a big stock. It is my most traded stock I've ever traded, and it is something to pay attention to, because if that does dip down and retest these levels and just curl right back up, we can still be bullish, right? We can still see that swing up, and maybe we go make a new all-time high for Aapl. The reason I like to point out these type of things is to help you get in the mentality of, I don't want to be overly bearish, overly bullish at any time. I mainly want to say, this is a good signal. Is it playing out? Is it curling down? Am I getting screwed? Do I need to get out of this play? That's the type of things we talk about in the course in the description, how to manage your trade. But right now we see a MACD. We talk about the positioning of the MACD in the course down in the description. Everything's 90% off, but the positioning of the MACD here for Aapl is telling me, hey, if we do pull down here, it's most likely just some kind of pullback. Okay, that's what this is telling me. Now, if we would pull back, bounce up, and then cross down again, and we get closer to that center line, different story, right? If we see something ugly, we bounce up, people think we're going all-time highs, and then you see that weekly curl down. Well, that's confirming, hey, we're going to go into this negative trend. We're really going to begin that negative trend because we are closer to that center line. We are closer to going into a negative trend, and that is very key to understand. So for Aapl, looking forward, the hint that we can get from it is maybe this is just going to be some kind of pullback, or maybe this pullback will keep moving sideways, right? Pulling back with time, and then we're going to see that confirmation up, because technically Aapl does not have any weekly reversal signals up here on your MACD or your RSI. You can see the divergence, but since they're not at the same time, that is leaning us towards a pullback for Aapl. Tesla is actually saying a similar thing to Aapl, which is pullback. Now, Tesla has crossed up on a monthly scale. That means that Tesla's charts are kind of telling you that Tesla might be a good investment for the next 12 to 24 months. So that's something to pay attention to. But at the same time, we're looking at weekly charts today, and I just want you to notice how if we did roll over soon, right? I'm talking about a bunch of ifs just so we're ready to react. Obviously, in the shorter time frames, we're going to go over that on Sunday. So if you want those shorter time frames and we give out the weekly expected moves for those buying the cues, please subscribe and join us for Sunday, okay? Because we're going to go into those shorter time frames, and those are very important week to week, but it's always good to keep the macro in your mind, okay? So what we're paying attention to here is the potential for a double top. The potential for a double top is here just because this MACD is still relatively close to that center line on the weekly scale, and we see a little divergence there on the RSI, more leaning towards a pullback, which tells me maybe this is some kind of fake out. Maybe we go down and retest these type levels, or retest this low, maybe retest 180.92. I should still be leaning towards pullback because I'm not seeing them on both indicators at the same time. And I'm actually seeing something very bullish. If you look at patterns right now. We are seeing almost a left head and a right shoulder. If I draw a line across here, you're going to see a left, a head, and a right shoulder. So even if we do pull back on that weekly scale and we curl back up, you might get that cup and handle within a cup and handle type attitude. And I think that is something very clear to pay attention to. And the reason that I want to give you something bullish to pay attention to for Tesla is because it has turned up on a monthly scale. Amazon, we need to probably look at the shorter time frames for this. Even going into a daily chart would be good. I just really wanted to focus on weekly charts and show you guys how to really look at these things and pay attention for these weekly moves. And one thing that Amazon did a very, very good job of, we caught the daily divergences, but look at even the weekly scale. And people think you can't trade the weekly. It just means take out longer expirations and things like that, or use it. If you're an investor, you can use weekly scale to really invest. It would cause you to mainly like be buying or selling only a couple times a year, or I think it's 2 to 4 times a year if you're trading on the weekly scale with divergence strategies. So for this point right here, we noticed that we had an upward move, but notice that your MACD is turned down with a divergence right there. You can see little green bars here, and once that produced a red bar, what happened? Well, we went from 183, we'll say, all the way down to 150, 184, right? 151. So that is a pretty massive drop. That is a pretty damn big drop, and that's why you want to pay attention if things are rejecting towards that level, because this actually did chop that low. This could be a lower high. Okay, so we're paying attention to that on the shorter time frames. But for now, we would say a bullish thing would be, do you curl up on this MACD? If you curl up, you can see positivity. Watch out, because that could just be a couple weeks of positivity, and then see if that turns back down, right? We're always thinking of multiple scenarios. And the key thing with this divergence right here, and why you want to pay attention to it, especially if we go and make another point and curl down, is you have it on the MACD, you have it on the RSI at the same time. Now, you are still in positive territory. That's why we have to talk about something bullish happening, but at the moment we just need to pay attention, because those VIX signals, the dollar is bottoming, VIX is showing you a crash signal already, so we have to pay attention to the current time. You can see the dollar go up over time. We're going to talk about that in a bit, but you can see the dollar continue to go up while the market goes up, and that's something key to understand. You can see a lot of times where weeks on weeks you'll see that dollar scaling, and then you see the sudden drop. So this is something to pay attention to for Amazon, but I just wanted to point out, hey, this signal right here led us to this. So if we reject here and just go negative, that might be a little bit worse, but we do have that opportunity, as we're still positive, to curl up into positive territory. That's where we just want to watch out in case we make any kind of divergence at this level. I think Nvda is in a similar boat. I mean, we pointed out the fact that this MACD was going up and the price action's going up. So that's fantastic. The only problem is, if you really look across, you had divergence pretty significant here on the RSI. But I want you to notice something here. It's not on the MACD at the same time. That's right. This video, we've been talking about having them at the same time. And remember this too, anything that is true on a weekly scale can be true on a little 30-minute. It can be true on a little 2-hour. So if we don't see these signals the same on a 2-hour, that is leaning more towards a 2-hour pullback. So what would I be saying about this on the weekly scale, considering I have it on one indicator, not the other? Well, this is leaning towards some kind of pullback. Now, we'll have to see what happens with this. Just because it is leaning towards a pullback, that just means it's a higher probability to be a pullback, as this is very high up in positive territory. But what we want to pay attention to is, are you curling up into positive territory, right? Are you curling up into positive territory? Nothing's 100%, but if this curls up, you would say most likely a new all-time high is coming for Nvda. And that is something very good to know, right? If my indicator is confirming an upside move on a weekly scale, and that's confirming towards this high, that means over the next 2 weeks, we could go make that new all-time high. Right? That's what the probabilities would say. In this moment, it's saying, hey, we're still pulling back, we're consolidating in some way, maybe we're able to break out and curl up that MACD. But the key thing here to understand with technical analysis is everything that we say as technical analysts is not 100%. Nothing in the market is 100%. That is why it is important to trade like water. That is why I say that phrase all the time. It is important to pay attention to both sides, not get too bullish, not get too bearish. Don't be one of those guys on Twitter always saying like, oh, how's the dip? I'm buying. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, pay attention to the signals and you will do just fine. And trust your signals, you will do just fine. Trust your gut a lot of the time. But if this MACD does curl up, what if we go make a divergence point and then that says, uh-oh, the monthly scale can start to roll over? That is something I really want to pay attention to and for Nvda. And I think we need to still pay attention if this ends up rejecting because of volatility, still turned up on that daily scale. Then you see something like AMD and you're like, well, this thing is breaking out. It's curling up on the weekly scale. It's going positive. So everything about AMD is saying positivity. Okay, everything about AMD is saying positivity. So it is closing at the high of the week. We are breaking through a wedge. We are curled up on the MACD. We are up above that center line for the RSI. And sneaky enough, this is a slightly difficult divergence to see for the RSI, but you can see it. The divergence takes the closing of the bar. So that would be this point right here and this point right here. So when that divergence was made at this low down here, you see the divergence down there on the RSI, not on the MACD at the same time, but that would be this point here. And you notice it's relatively flat. So this is actually almost a double bottom at this point, and this can head to the upside. So that is something to pay attention to. You can see these type of signals and say, oh, that is divergence. Let me see if that crosses up. It crosses up and you get that breakout moment. So everything about AMD is saying positivity, which is very interesting because the SPY has a divergence on the weekly scale, and that's why you want to pay attention to the SPY. Even if you're trading a regular stock like AMD, it is good to learn how to analyze the SPY and the Qs, right? But this would say for AMD, we're getting that breakout moment. It's time to get euphoric. The thing that I could see for AMD going forward is reacting up to this level here, 183.20. We get that reaction there. It would be nice to see that weekly pull back and then curl back up, because you would have some great structure. Even if you had a little bit deeper going back into this zone like we did right here, this is something I would pay attention to, because that would be great structure to head higher. You'd have a left, you'd have a head, you'd have a right shoulder. So I'm not saying things have to crash. I'm saying that the SPY is showing you a signal that has led to a lot of crashes if it confirms. So if that does confirm, we need to react. And most likely if it does confirm, you're already going to see things like AMD rolling over. And it's good right after AMD to go look at something like Meta, because Meta did see some great stuff, right? We made this level up in here. We kind of created that cup. We got that handle. We created another cup. We got that handle. Now we're breaking out. So this is a good look. And maybe that's not a cup and handle on the shorter time frames, right? That wick might have violated that a little bit, closing at the high. But I just want you to see how steep this MACD is. I want you to see how steep this RSI is. We did not have divergence over here. We did not have divergence over here. So this was overall leaning towards a pullback, and we talked about that 453.08 level at these highs with those divergences. Well, guess what? You have a bunch of shorter time frame divergences that say a daily pullback can come, but if that daily pullback is too big, you actually can see this weekly cross, and it is closer to crossing that center line. So it is a time to pay attention. Even though this is breaking out, it doesn't mean, hey, take a play to the downside, right? Because nothing's confirmed. Right? In the course, we really talk about waiting for confirmations, being patient, because you can form some stuff here. Even if this does curl over, you could curl over, you could bounce up, you could create the good structure to head to the downside. But after looking at AMD and seeing how bullish that was, and then you look at something like Meta, you would say Meta might not be the best investment, because this thing could go out of gas pretty soon. So it is something to pay attention to, unless it sees something very, very crazy, which I believe it already is seeing something crazy. That craziness usually does make some divergences, and that's why you got to pay attention to this weekly time frame, because if this rolls over, it's not the best news. But as of right now, you are pretty bullish in this area. You have created decent structure to head higher, so we can see some upside for Meta, but I just want to be aware if that curls down at any time on these bigger time frames. Just real quick, I just wanted to mention that we can pay attention to AMC on the weekly scale, but it's not necessarily the absolute best time frame to look at for something like AMC. So on Sunday, we're going to talk about this 437 level. We're going to talk a little bit more in the shorter time frame, so make sure to join us. Make sure you're subscribed for that. And we're going to update this 504, right? We're going to update the crazy level that the options market would be taken off guard if you get through. So that is something we do for AMC and GME. The weekly scale, the main thing I would be paying attention to is if that weekly crosses down. You are still in negative territory. That's the main thing we can do with this kind of price action, with this kind of look of the MACD, is when it curls down into negative territory, bad things happen. And to prove that, especially for something like AMC and GME, something that is actively suppressed, I want you to see the last time that it curled down on a weekly scale was this massive, massive bar over here back in August of 2023. And notice what happened after that. Well, we went from a price point of 1250 all the way down to something like 224 before we started to see positivity, even when that weekly curled up. So that tells me I have to be very aware if AMC is curling down on a weekly scale, and make sure if I want positivity, I have that updated crazy level for next week. And we give that out every single Sunday, so make sure you're subscribed. As we flip over to something like GME, a little bit of a different story, right? Little different story. Now, the cool thing about GME was down at the actual lows, you did create that divergence. You did create that divergence down here for the MACD, for the RSI at the same time. So weirdly enough, the weekly scale told you right here, 1621 was a great buy, and you're going to see some good price action. That ended up being great price action, right? That ended up being great price action, but the weekly has gone positive and curled down. So the key thing with this is it's curled down. It's overall still saying pullback on the weekly scale. What I'd be paying attention to if I'm trading this on the weekly scale is anytime that curls up into positive territory. Most likely you want to pay attention to daily timeframes and things like that still for this kind of thing, because that move can be quick if it's going to see something crazy. And we're going to update that crazy level that would take the options market off guard if you got above, right? This week it was 2480. This coming week it's going to change. So we're going to put that up for you on Sunday. Something to pay attention to for the weekly scale is any time that curls up, because you notice when that did curl up, yeah, it was a massive move. It was a 38% move, and people would be very hesitant to buy that. But at the same time, you know, there's a risk to going down from here, but your indicator is saying, hey, I have divergence, and that is curling up. So this means that trend can change, and the trend did change. Now you're in a positive trend. So if that weekly does turn up, you want to be paying close attention, because that is a bullish sign for GME if that turns up. And we like to talk into the future a little bit. I know that this is not a good sign. I know that this is a sign you're pulling back, and if we get across that center line, it is bearish. But what I want to talk about is the opportunity for a trade. The opportunity for a trade could be something like this, right? We could do something like that to head higher, or maybe this just takes off, and when this crosses, we see something crazy. So that's why I want to pay attention to both sides right now. I know I showed you AMD. I know I showed you Tesla on that. Well, we talked about Tesla on the monthly scale and things like that, how it might be a good investment for 12 to 24 months. But if it's a good investment for 12 to 24 months, then why is cash, why is the dollar, why is Dixie going up very, very dramatically? And that continued on Friday. So we're going to talk about this on the shorter time frames, right? This is going to be a big note going into next week. Is this insider selling? And is this going to actually hit the tape? And we're going to see some selling come next week. That is something to pay attention to. Notice here the weekly scale has not turned up yet, but that is an absolutely massive move. Usually when you see massive moves like this from the dollar, from these lows with some divergences down here, right? We caught those divergences on that 4-hour time frame. That's what told us, hey, we mentioned this before the week even started, the dollar still has a good chance to explode. The dollar is exploding just as we expected. So at this moment, I got to see if that weekly time frame is able to turn up on this MACD, if that RSI is able to get above the center line. But the main thing to understand about cash is a lot of people talk crap on the dollar. A lot of people talk crap on the US dollar. The fact of the matter is the US dollar is still the biggest hedge in the entire market. I just want to be very clear about that. People hedge with gold, people hedge with TLT, people hedge with options in certain stocks, but at the same time, just notice this. When you do trade, not the physical asset of even gold, right? Something that people see as a safe haven. When you do trade something like GLD, when you trade the actual ETFs or anything like that, what are you doing? Well, you're taking cash, you're putting it into an ETF still. And then when you do want to sell or make money off that option, well, you're selling gold, you're selling GLD, you're selling the ETF, and then you're putting that back into cash. You still see value in cash in some way. I'm sure every single day you guys swipe your card, you guys use cash in some way every single day. You cannot say that about Bitcoin. You cannot say that about gold. You can say it slightly because you use it in your devices. But for the most part, if you're wanting to buy something, if you're wanting to trade something, as in at the grocery store, trading something for food, it's going to be cash about 99.9% of the time. So this is a huge safe haven, and you have to understand if this is turning up, yeah, that can take place for a while. It could maybe not hit the tape until this actually curls up and goes positive, right? It could take weeks and weeks for that to actually hit the tape. But just notice that some people are flying into cash very, very quickly, and that should have a little warning flag above your head right now when you are trading. The other thing that should have a little warning flag for you is volatility, because we keep trying to cross down. We keep trying to cross down. We keep trying to cross down, but we keep rejecting. So this is remaining positive. You have room on this RSI to grow. If you start to break and close above these levels, notice the wicks, right? Notice the wicks. This little trend here could be pretty important. This trend goes all the way back to the highs back in 2022. right? So 2022 is when we were seeing that bear market really start to begin, and therefore we had to pay attention to it. We made this little trend, and we noticed that if that actually closed above that, it would not be the best sign. But I just wanted to show you how volatility is really struggling on the weekly scale to turn down. Now, this is the only one we're going to look at the daily scale, because I want to remind you guys every single week, and when this does change, I want to keep reminding you, this is a crash signal. When the 50-day moving average crosses the 200-day moving average, that is a big crash signal, and we're holding above all those moving averages. We're positive on the MACD, we're positive on the RSI. So we'll pay attention to this. We do have some reversal signals in here we can pay attention to, but for the most part, we would say, hey, if this remains positive, I have to pay attention on those shorter time frames anytime that does curl up. And the weekly scale is holding in positive territory and still green on that MACD. So it tells me, yeah, I can't feel very, very, very safe right now. I can take upward plays, but for the most part, I want to be paying attention to bad signals just in case something bad does happen. So it tells me, hey, be a little bit cautious, because volatility still is in a place where it could pop at any time. And we're also seeing that signal from the SPY, right? We're seeing this signal from the SPY showing some weekly divergences. So this can head higher for sure, but if I'm seeing this and I'm seeing volatility still remaining positive on the weekly scale and on the daily scale, then I have to be weary of this sudden drop that can take place. I have to be weary of this showing a little red bar on the histogram telling me, hey, this has crossed, because that can get a little bit uglier. And if you get some bad news behind it, that means momentum is very weak and you can see something crazy to the downside. What do you think? Is something really bad going to happen in October with these signals? Do we have more room to the upside, as this is still turned up positive in positive territory? It's still bullish. Does AMD have an argument to head up, or is the dollar saying people are flying to cash for some reason? This is all things that you have to take into consideration while trading, especially on the shorter time frames, because it can tell you, hey, I need to pay attention for reversal signals on a 2-hour, on a daily, on a weekly chart, because that will really help me understand, hey, I shouldn't be overzealous for these upside plays as much, right? That is overall what I think the signals are telling me today. It doesn't mean I can't take upward plays. I just want to make sure that those are remaining positive. I want to make sure to be trading like water. I want to make sure to be managing my risk. I want to be managing my trades. And that's a big, big thing that a lot of people don't do. If you can learn how to do that, you'll be very, very successful. And we have a whole video. We have like a 20-25-minute video in the course down in the description called Using Technical Indicators. It is fantastic. I left it at 90% off because we are seeing craziness all around pretty much the entire year of 2024. So I left it on the sale, especially for the end of this year, because we need help, right? People need help out there. People need to understand these type of things to really be a good trader. And I think you personally, I think if you're watching to the end of this video, I think you have a great, great opportunity to be one of those people, because you are diligent, you are paying attention, and you're watching the entire video, which is something I really encourage, because something we say at the end of the video could totally change your outlook on something that we covered at the beginning of the video. And that is why I really appreciate you guys being a part of this channel. I really appreciate you watching to the end of the video. And I hope that you dedicate yourself to some learning over the weekend, but I also hope that at the same time, you spend time with family. We are in crazy times. I highly encourage this every single weekend. Spend time with family. Go do something fun. If you don't have anyone to hang out with, that's perfectly fine. You can go treat yourself to a nice meal. I highly encourage that. Go to the gym. Really treat yourself well this weekend. Have some fun. If something you really like is playing video game, go play a video game. You know what I mean? Just do something fun for yourself, because we really take it for granted these days. And I think a lot of people need to understand that it can be taken away. And I think we're in a time where there are people actively trying to take it away from you around every corner. So be careful out there. Keep your family safe. Stay safe out there. Make sure to treat yourself over the weekend. And I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. Even if you're dedicating yourself to some learning, go do something fun. Thank you guys for watching. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for subscribing, liking, doing all that good stuff. I hope that this video in some way was helpful to at least some people out there. And I hope you have a great weekend. All right. I will see you Sunday for those shorter time frames. Peace.